Well, we left off the last video with us driving across New Mexico in a Mini Cooper with 2 tall adults and 2 German Shepherd dogs. That was the day before Thanksgiving. We arrived in Colorado Springs on Thanksgiving Day at around noon and ended up having a lovely and relaxing Thanksgiving Day with the family. We got to see Chad's sister, which was really our timing motivator. And we were able to kind of relax, enjoy some good food, enjoy some family.
Yeah. So then the next day, Friday, which is always the day after Thanksgiving.
Good job.
Yeah. I had to drive from Colorado Springs down to La Junta, which is about 2 hours away. And I was meeting the tow truck to deliver the Unimog to Rob's shop. Here's a little bit of video of that. I didn't film too much. All right, it is Friday morning, the day after Thanksgiving. I am on my way from Colorado Springs down to La Junta to meet the truck driver so we can unload the truck and leave it with Rob or in Rob's parking lot. So it's snowing and it's 14 degrees and it doesn't look like it's getting any warmer. So it should be interesting. Hopefully the truck starts and I can actually get it off the truck or the trailer. So we'll see. Here's a view of what we're seeing right now. Probably not the worst for Colorado, but decently miserable conditions. So I'll catch up in 2 hours. Truck made it. We are here at Terry Lee Enterprises. Rob Pickering, the mechanic. There's the sign right there. There's our truck. We had a little bit of pressure, so the brakes worked, so I was able to pull it off the truck. Truck's right there. And you can see there's all kinds of cool toys in his yard. So Rob was nice enough to come down with his brother, who's also a Unimog guy, and let me in, help me park, and we're gonna pick up on Monday. What happened at Rob's? Everybody's asking what happened to the truck. You know, what came of the towing? What went wrong?
Why did we break down?
Yeah, what lessons were learned? So here we go. I didn't get any footage of Rob or Rob's shop inside. I did ask him if I could help work on the truck or film them working on the truck. He wasn't super receptive to that idea. And I totally respect that and understand it.
Absolutely.
So out of respect for him, I didn't shoot anything in the shop. So that's why I don't have anything of the shop or anything that was done. So I'm just gonna have to tell you what we did. So I thought I would be able to visit the shop more often, but that 2-hour drive ended up being quite a deterrent to driving down there.
Especially with the weather.
Yeah, so it was 2 hours each way, so that ended up taking up most of a day to get down there and back. And then if I spent any time down there, it just, extended it. I didn't really miss anything with the video on the dropping off of the truck, except for one thing. And that was when Rob showed up, the Unimog was sitting there on the big truck on the trailer, waiting for us to unload it. I was waiting for him to get there so he could tell me where to go with it. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh no, they wrapped the chains around the axles. Your brake lines are probably all crushed."
Oh.
So
how did you feel at that point?
That was awful.
Yeah.
That was just another
kick in the gut.
Yep, kick in the gut. And I was like, of course that's what happened. It wouldn't be,
Nothing goes smoothly.
Yeah. So that was just par for course apparently. And he was right. Luckily, the air system and the brakes worked enough to offload the Unimog, but they definitely crushed some of the airlines.
And you made reference to that in the first video, I think you...
Yeah, I said, what did we do wrong here?
Yeah.
Or what did the driver do wrong here? So that's what's happened. He crushed the brake lines on the axle. So then we parked the truck and we ended up meeting the following Monday. So what did we end up getting done on the Unimog while it was at Rob's shop? And I think it was there for a total of a month.
About a month.
Yeah, we were there about a month. Like I said in the last video, we were lucky to have a place to stay in Colorado Springs.
Thank you, Pat and Ed, again. You're amazing.
And we could have stayed there as long as we needed to, and it's very comfortable. The dogs were comfortable. Gina could work from there, so it was fine. We could stay as long as we needed to. So we were very lucky in that. So we ended up staying about a month. That's how long it took to get all this done. So here's the list of things we did. So first up was the brake valve issue. That was the main reason why we had the truck towed. That was not an issue when we left Long Beach, but it was an issue later on. So it wasn't one of the reasons we were going to see Rob to begin with, but we couldn't do anything without fixing that. We looked into getting complete brake valves, and nobody in the States had them. Rob didn't have them, Scott didn't have them. They probably would have cost about $1,200 if we did find one. We could have ordered one from overseas, but that would have just taken too long and cost too much. So Scott at Expedition Imports had a rebuild kit, which is basically just O-rings, some springs, I think maybe a few other small parts. And that was about $200, so much better price in the end. And we ordered that kit, they put that in, and the valve has been working fine ever since. And all the cold weather we had after that, we did not have a single issue with leaking, so that fixed it for sure. So a rebuild kit for the win.
What about the hairline fractures that you mentioned before that you found while we were stuck in Show, though?
That's a good question, and Rob had never seen anything like that or knew what they were about. So he said when he pulled it apart, he saw the JB weld that I had put in there, and he didn't think it was a problem. It didn't really affect the performance of anything. So we have a brake valve that has JB weld in it over those cracks, so those cracks are gone.
Yay!
In theory. But we have no idea why they were there or if they actually had anything to do with the issue. My guess is that it was the O-rings and that was the problem.
Gotcha.
Old rubber, O-rings in cold weather don't mix well together. All right, next up, the crushed brake lines. This was our second issue that we didn't have leaving Long Beach and didn't plan on getting fixed at Rob's, but ended up being very important and having to fix. So most of the hard brake lines that run along the axle were crushed by the chains that were used to tie down the truck from the driver who towed the truck. He was the one that got under there and wrapped the chains around and tied them down. You can argue whether or not I should have known better, and I should know that. I wasn't thinking of it at the time. I feel that if I would have been the one that was crawling under there and wrapping the chains around the axles, I would have seen that I was wrapping them around very small, fragile brake lines, and I would have chosen not to do that. But, it is what it is. So that ended up costing us about $800 to replace all those. And that was not something we were expecting to pay for.
But what do you got to get it fixed, right?
We had to get it fixed.
Yep.
We couldn't drive the truck without brake lines, obviously. So we are trying to recoup that money from United States of Freight. It's not looking too promising. We haven't heard much from them in a long time. So we'll probably just end up eating that. And it's just another expensive lesson learned. We had a number of minor oil leaks. And that was actually the main reason why I wanted to bring it to Rob. I had some leaking of oil pretty high up on the engine. I thought might have been coming out of the block somehow. It seemed like a project bigger than I could tackle. That turned out not to be such a big deal. So we ended up replacing the oil pan gasket, which I could have done here had I had known that was the issue. And then the hour meter gasket. So there's an hour meter on the front of the engine and it was leaking oil there. I probably could have done that too after finding out that you can just take that piece off and put the gasket on and put it back on without having to take the whole flywheel off the front, the pulley wheel off the front. I thought I was going to have to pull the pulley wheel and that's a huge process. So I thought it was going to be a big deal. But I was fine having Rob do that, not a problem. The torque tube boot, I had a problem with that filling up with oil and leaking oil, which it shouldn't have any oil in there at all. And normally when we would open that up, it would drain oil out of it. When I got there and Rob checked it, it was dry. So he had thought that it might have had something to do with the transmission vent being clogged up. That was something I addressed before I left, because I talked to him about that on the phone. So I pulled that transmission vent off, blew it out as best I could, cleaned it, and then put it back on. So we think maybe that might have kept that seal from leaking, because there was not a buildup of pressure in the transmission like there was when that vent was clogged. Later on, I ended up replacing that vent. That was once I got to Washington, which is way more in the future than where we're at right now with this video. And I have a short for that. You can see that here. I don't know where it's going to be. Everybody points. I have no idea. So that was it for all of the leaks, the oil leaks. We still have 1 or 2 leaks that weren't addressed. We just ran out of time, and they weren't that serious, so we'll probably deal with those later. So after Rob inspected the truck, we found out that the drag link and the tie rod ends were loose. I had complained a little bit about the steering on the freeway. I just felt there was a lot of play in the steering wheel, which caused me to have to really keep both hands on the wheel the whole time. It wasn't like a regular car where you could just put your knee on the wheel and just let it, and it would just go straight. It would kind of drift side to side, and you would end up overcorrecting a lot because there was a lot of play. It wasn't a big deal, but when you're driving that many hours, it gets tiring. And I thought I would just have him look at it and see what the problem was.
Do you think that, how did you know, we're not that experienced with Unimogs. How did you know it was an issue versus that's just the way the Unimog drives?
I didn't actually.
Okay.
So I just asked him if that was just the way they were.
Okay.
He thought that it should steer pretty much like a regular car.
Okay.
Okay. It was his idea to look into it. Okay. And like I said, we found that the tie rod ends and the drag link ends were loose. They had a lot of play in them. And you can't just replace the ends on those. Mercedes makes you buy the entire bar. So we replaced the tie rod and the drag link. So that ended up costing us probably about $1,000 right there. But that needed to be done. Another thing that he did was he went into the steering box and was able to tighten up the steering in the steering box. So I guess that is not a great big deal, but that's what he ended up doing.
Well, he was in there.
Yeah. And the steering is fantastic now. It's very good. It's still not as good as like the Montero or our Subaru, but it's fine.
You noticed a difference.
Definitely a difference.
Gotcha.
And it's great.
Okay.
Yeah. So lastly, upon inspection, Rob noticed cracking in the sidewalls of our tires, and he was also concerned about the 2006 date codes. So if you remember, and if you don't, we have a video on this. Pretty early on in owning the truck, like almost right away, we got the tires that were on the truck at the moment. They're Michelin XZL tires, and at that time, we didn't know anything about date codes, so we thought buying old tires would be fine.
Good way to save money, right? They're new. They were new. They were just old stock, so.
Yeah. So if you don't know, new old stock just means that they're new, not used, but they're old stock, so they've been sitting around for a long time. So these have been sitting around since 2006, but they've never been put on a truck. So I thought, they're new.
Right.
And they were a great deal, and so we put them on the truck. And they might have been fine. We might have gotten away with that. I'm sure lots of people do. But as much road driving as we do and plan on doing, it didn't seem like it was worth the risk to us.
Yeah.
Rob was concerned about it, so I had to take that seriously. And a blowout at 50 miles per hour could be catastrophic. Doesn't mean it will be catastrophic, but it could be. We have a really tall sidewall on those tires, as you can see. So if that tire blows out, we're going to drop, whatever corner it happens in, we're going to drop significantly. So It's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
So we ended up replacing those. Rob had some in stock, and we ended up going with the Continental MPT 81s of the same size, and we got all 5 of those. And that was not a that was another cost that we did not expect to have when we left Long Beach. And the 5 tires cost us about $4,300. So another very expensive lesson learned. So here's a little tire history. These are the first ones that came on the truck. The reason we changed these was because we wanted new rims. I didn't want the rims with the snap ring. I thought those were kind of dangerous. I have a whole video on that. If you want to watch it, go back and watch that. Actually, the person who sold me all of the rims also had a guy and was selling these tires very cheap. I think they were $500 a piece, which is a really good deal for brand new quote-unquote tires, new old stock. I just didn't know anything about date codes. So this is an MPT 80 made by Continental. This is a Michelin XZL. This is a 12.5 R20, and this is a 365 by 80 R20. And then we have the new Continentals 365 by 80 R20, and this is an MPT 81. So it's a little bit different pattern than the Continental MPT 80. These have 2 wide lugs here, and they're a little bit larger, and then you got the outside lugs. The Michelin is completely different. It just has 4 really large ones that go across in this kind of Z pattern. And the MPT 81 is more similar to the MPT 80. It's got these outside lugs, but the ones in the center, that's actually 3 wide and they're smaller. So very similar, but different. Oh, and I forgot to mention, these are for sale. I have these wheels. If anybody wants those wheels, they're perfectly good. They're in great shape. They've been covered, actually. They're wet right now because I rolled them over here, but they've been covered. And they've been living in California, so not crazy weather. And these tires are actually good too, and those are available too if you want them. So let me know. The only issue with these tires, they're fairly new. They don't have much wear, but they do have a little bit of cupping on the edges. And that's just wear on the edges of the tire, and that is caused by the stance of the Unimog. You can see the tires sit at an angle. I think that might be camber. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hit me up if you are interested. I got 4 of these. So in total, we spent about $8,300 at Rob's. Rob was great to work with. He was extremely knowledgeable. He was nice enough to give me a tour of all his Unimogs, which was amazing. They weren't all his Unimogs and his clients' Unimogs. The only issue with Rob is getting the truck to him. He's in the middle of Colorado. We are nowhere near that. We're lucky to have family there, so we have a reason to go there. So that's great. So anytime we're in that area, I'm going to try to get a list of things for Rob to do, things that are too hard for me or things I don't want to tackle, and then drop it off and have work done.
So I guess a lot of people, a lot of people with a lot of money had shipped their trucks there. You had said so. Not everybody's on a budget that we're on. So you can spend $5,000 to ship the truck across country and.
Yeah, he had a lot of really expensive trucks there, getting a lot of very expensive things done to them. So if you're spending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on your truck, paying a couple $1,000s to have it shipped there.
Not a big deal.
Not a big deal, probably. Just a drop in the bucket. For us, it's a big deal. That's $4,000 worth of stuff that we aren't able to fix on the truck.
Right.
That could be our rooftop tent for the truck.
Right.
The whole cost there.
Right. So with all the lessons learned in the end, it was painful.
So, yeah, the lessons learned. First of all, never tie down the truck around the axles. Always go to the frame. And I can't be explicit enough with that. It's very straightforward. So if you ever have your truck towed in any way, because you can't flat tow it either, you can't tow it behind a tow truck. So if you're going to have it towed in any way, shape, or form, be there when it gets towed, when it gets loaded, and make sure that you don't wrap anything around the axles. So I'm thinking about putting signs on there. I've actually heard this is an issue with shipping the truck overseas. You know, they're tying it down and the boat and everything, and you're not allowed to join them when they do that. So it can be a real problem apparently.
Yeah.
So never tie down the truck around the axles. Lesson number 1.
Okay.
So lesson 2. This is my lesson and this is my rule. Everyone else might not agree with me on this, but don't buy new old stock tires. They may be a great deal and you may get an amazing price on them, but if you're using the truck for travel, I would not recommend it. We didn't have a blowout, so we didn't have an issue, so I'm not speaking from that kind of experience, but rubber deteriorates over time, it gets old, it gets weak. It's just too dangerous. If you're using the truck on your property or to do work around your farm or whatever, that's a different situation. And I would probably do new old stock all day long. Maybe even used tires, because it doesn't matter. If the tire blows out while you're doing some work in the field, whatever. But if you're on a freeway, a busy freeway doing 50 miles an hour, in our case, maybe more if you've got an overdrive or something like that, and your tire blows out in your 15,000 pound vehicle, that's going to be probably a bad day.
Yeah.
At the very least, you might damage something on the truck. At the most, you might kill somebody.
It's just not worth it.
Yeah, either your own family, you might roll the truck, who knows. It might steer you into somebody else and you kill them. Just not worth it at all.
No.
So that is something I just wouldn't recommend doing. And I will not do in the future. Luckily, I got away with it for as long as we did do it.
Rob did tell you he thought it was a liability too, didn't you? I think that was kind of your message back to me, that Rob thought it was a liability, and I was like, oh, I'm risk adverse, so I'm like, yeah, it's just pennies now. We won't regret that later down the road.
Yeah, I have heard stories, and I don't know how accurate they are, that people have had blowouts that caused an accident, and then they were held responsible for it because they had old tires on there and they knew about it. So take that for what it's worth. It's just a story. I don't know how valid it is, but that seems kind of risky. So yeah, you got the moral and ethical issues and the liability issues financially.
And we didn't want to worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just sucked it up and we ate the cost.
Yep.
Another $4,000 lesson learned. All right, number 3, the last lesson we learned. When it gets really cold, O-rings shrink and air valves leak in these old trucks. Might not happen in new trucks, I don't know, but I have a feeling it's more of an old rubber type thing. So the lesson is, don't freak out. Let the truck run for hours if you need to. You can just let it idle for hours, maybe even drive it around a little bit. Things will warm up and probably get better. I'm not saying for sure that's going to happen, but before you go towing the truck or doing anything drastic, let it run for a long time and see if it gets better, and it probably will.
Do you think if you would have let it run in Arizona, we would have been okay?
I don't know, but probably. Yes. Yes, it does hurt. That was a very expensive lesson learned, and it does hurt. And yeah. But, you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
So that's the 3 main lessons to take away from this. And that last lesson, actually, in the next video, will come into play more.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Thanks for watching.